Our anger is righteous and our struggle is just.
Is it really a just and righteous cause? To answer this question, let's go back and find out how we got here in the first place. Over the years, there has been an increasing pay gap between CEOs of these publicly listed companies and the employees. In large part, this is responsible for the resentment that the employees have against their CEOs and executives. Just look at this chart that has been constructed with data from the Economic Policy Institute. The data is presented as a ratio of the CEO to average worker compensation over the years from 1965 to 2021. I need to mention that for all the big three automobile manufacturers, their ratios are similar to the one that are shown in the chart here. 281 for Ford, 365 for Stellantis, and 362 for GM. We can see that with the exception of the 2000s when we had the dot-com bubble and the 2008 financial crisis, in general, the CEO pay has been increasing exponentially over the years, while the pay for the workers has largely remained static, and therefore these workers do not feel that they have had a fair share of the growth of these corporations. I must say that this is what I find to be the broken aspect of our capitalist world today. The CEOs and executives that are leading these Fortune 500 corporations are compensated handsomely. The worker who carries the bigger burden of work is not compensated and is actually made to eat the crumbs that are falling from the tables of these masters. You would have thought that executive compensation would be commensurate with leadership abilities and performance. But no, generally the CEOs are well paid even if they are mediocre. What serves them in most cases are fancy accounting procedures. I'm going to give an example here of Toyota, of which we heard in the news some time back, how that they valued this asset at around $1 billion US, and just a few months later they sold the same asset at around 40 million USD. Even Charlie Munger has decried these fancy accounting procedures, as reported by CNBC. Quote, what Munger is saying is that there exists very powerful incentives for accountants and auditors to, on the margin, let their clients get away with some misdemeanors. The longer these misdemeanors go unpunished, the more companies will push the envelope. The treatment that these workers get in terms of compensation, at least in management's eyes, gives you the impression that they look at these workers as an indispensable piece of the company and therefore can easily be tossed about and should not be prioritized. Also, I thought until UAW declared this strike, and you could see the panic in the CEOs of these companies, GM, Ford, and Stellantis. If one looks at these grievances, it is clear that UAW is justified.
Our anger is righteous.
Being a righteous cause, I'm not sure about that. So what are the disadvantages? If this strike is prolonged, the USA will slip backward in terms of EV adoption, and by extension, the entire automotive industry in the US could be wiped out. And I'm not kidding. Most estimations show that by 2030, the vehicle of choice for the average consumer will be an EV. So companies that are not producing EVs are literally signing their corporate death certificate. Apart from consumer preferences, regulatory requirements will also push the early adoption of electric vehicles. For example, we've learned that automobile manufacturers are complaining through their lobbying group called Alliance for Automotive Innovation. They're complaining about new CAFE rules from NHTSA. For those that may not be aware, CAFE is an acronym for Corporate Average Fuel Economy. Rules are designed to regulate how far a vehicle can go on 1 gallon of fuel. The automakers claim that the new rules are unattainable. Of course, NHTSA had a short answer: just make them electric. On a side note, isn't it strange that an organization called Alliance for Automotive Innovation seems to be against innovation? Anyway, whether they accept it or not, competitors that are serious about EV transition are swiftly stealing global market share from these big three and many other automakers legacy automakers that don't want to jump into the waters. Recently, through the 2023 September sales, we've heard that BYD, a Chinese company, has become the fourth largest automaker in the world by sales volume. How did they even do it? During and post the pandemic years, when everyone else was complaining about supply chain disruptions, chip shortages, and how that these chip shortages were affecting them to deliver products to their customers, BYD was quietly producing cars. They were never affected by these supply chain disruptions, in part because they built this world-leading vertically integrated operation. As the automakers are fighting UAW, their competitors, the Chinese included, are quietly solidifying their presence in most countries. Crucially, even countries in North America and South America, right in the backyard of the big three. But there's another danger on the horizon. Some presidential hopefuls for the 2024 general elections are promising an abandonment of the push for electrification. That will have consequences of generational magnitude. But again, on the other hand, I think some of these politicians don't really mean what they're saying. They're probably just speaking what's convenient with the circumstances that we are in. For example, President Biden was in Detroit a few weeks ago supporting the strike by UAW, but we know that he is the architect and chief supporter of the Inflation Reduction Act, which largely benefits the push towards electrification of mobility. In the end, it is possible to support the UAW workers and all workers for that matter, but also push for the transition to green mobility. In this case, it might be necessary for UAW to adjust their demands. For example, I'm not sure if it is realistic for UAW to request guarantees of no job losses from Ford, GM, and Stellantis. This is simply because when a new technology comes on the scene, there are painful decisions that will have to be made. Jobs are lost, but new jobs are created. It is therefore important for the individual to get retraining so that they can gain the skills that are required in the marketplace and are valuable for that matter. If this strike is not resolved in time, it may have consequences that are difficult to recover or might take a very long time to recover from. If, for example, it happens that the big three cannot truly satisfy the demand of the UAW union, it means a total collapse of the industry, in which the workers will still be the biggest losers because, make no mistakes, these CEOs are already set financially. They are millionaires. In any case, most of them can just pick another CEO job somewhere else. But the average Detroit worker will have lost for good. In addition, it's not only the UAW workers that are going to be affected. This is also going to affect small-tiered suppliers of the American automotive industry, who, by the way, have already started feeling the pain and have started voicing their concern. The Motor Equipment Manufacturers Association, an association of smaller manufacturers that supply the automobile industry, has actually written President Biden asking him to intervene in the situation to get it resolved. Quote, "The association urges you to effectuate federal assistance to ensure the survival and viability of this critical industry sector. Without federal assistance, the capacity of the industry to resume full production capacity is at risk." In resolving this, GM, Ford, Stellantis will have to make concessions as well. And I think they should consider capping CEO compensation at some multiple of the average worker in their companies. I'll give an example to illustrate my point. If the CEO is getting total compensation of around $1 million US, it means the lowest paid worker in that company cannot be paid anything less than 50,000 US dollars in a year, which 50,000 times 20 makes 1 million that the CEO is getting. That way, when the compensation of the CEO goes up, the workers are also pulled up in a similar fashion. I believe the workers would then accept what Jim Farley said, and I quote here. But part of the discussion has to be how can we work together to improve quality, reduce waste, lower absenteeism, and have greater flexibility. We need to have shared beliefs in a lean and respectful culture on our plant floor. We succeed or we fail together. Unfortunately, at the moment, the workers feel like they are failing alone without their CEO. Let me hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.